actionfigureresource.com. Yesterday's toys, today's treasures.
Indiana Jones, a collecting guide for action figure resource. It is undoubtable that the Indiana Jones movies have taken their place in cinema history. In terms of action figures, however, it has been a case of brief windows of popularity. Come with us now as we journey through history and guide you through the twisting, trap-laden corridors of Indiana Jones toys. In 1982, a year after Raiders of the Lost Ark was released to the absolutely joyful adulation of both audiences and critics, Kenner, who were by now on their Empire Strikes Back line and limbering up for Jedi, released a small, almost experimental series of 4 main figures. These were Indy himself, Marion Ravenwood, Gestapo creep Toht, and the Cairo Swordsman. Remember that fellow who intimidated Jones for all of 12 seconds before a dysentery-riddled Harrison Ford shot him impatiently? Yeah, him. Now remember those 4 because you're going to be seeing them again repeatedly. Kenner had had great success with a mail-in Boba Fett for their original Star Wars line, and for this one they've opted for the one that probably didn't present as much play opportunity as the others, Indy's rival Belloc, in ceremonial robes, all ready to open up the Ark of the Covenant and to have his head explode, which sadly wasn't a feature. These figures were very similar to the existing Star Wars and Empire line, only with jointed knees, first tested in the Butch and Sundance The Early Years line, and a quick-draw spring-loaded arm. As well as the basic assortment, there were also a Well of Souls and Map Room playset, adding crucial context for play. There was also a 12-inch Indy in the same vein as their Star Wars line of that scale, and of course by now, Kenner were experienced at sculpting Ford's likeness. There was a second series a year later in 1983 which added to the initial 4 Salah, a German mechanic, Indy disguised as a German soldier, Belloc in his more comfortable white suit, and an Arabian horse. There was also a Streets of Cairo playset with the Monkey Man. If you're into Kenner's Star Wars, be sure to check out our Vintage Collector Guide for that line. Then in 1984, to tie in with the follow-up, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, the license passed to LJN, now defunct, who were at the time preparing Thundercats for launch. These figures were far larger and bulkier. Once again you got Indy, with the arch-villain of that adventure, heart-grabbing Mola Ram, as well as a huge Thuggee. One of the issues Kenner and LJN faced was that while the movies were colossal fun and filled with vibrant characters, they didn't have the same analogous relationship with inventive play that the slew of aliens, droids, rebels and Imperials of Star Wars had. Even Short Round, who was clearly put in that movie for the kids, never got an action figure at the time. Similarly, LJN did not go for the obvious minecart playset, although prototypes were considered for all 3. This cautious approach gave both the Kenner and LJN lines comparatively limited life, and this issue would come back to bite Hasbro in several decades. 9 years passed with nothing much on the Indy front aside from some vinyl kits to tie in with The Last Crusade. Then followed an odd period in the 1990s fueled by nostalgia but not supported by the weight that would come with a new movie release. In 1993, Galoob released a Micro Machines box set after success with their tiny Star Wars craft. In 1999, Toys McCoy released an incredible and incredibly rare 12-inch Indy, which commands a high price now on the secondary market. Between 2000 and 2007, it was Disney who were behind the Indy license, this time releasing theme park exclusive action figures to tie in with their Stunt Spectacular showcase. These were in a 4.5-inch scale and replicated to some degree the earlier Kenner line with Indy, Marion, the Cairo Swordsman, and a German mechanic and soldier. There was also a variant African-American Indiana Jones to pay homage to the African-American stuntman in the show. The third series was simply a deluxe 7-inch figure of Indy sculpted by Gentle Giant. Then, to tie in with the release of Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the first Jones movie for 19 years, there was a sudden burst of activity. LEGO released a series of kits originally tying in with Raiders and The Last Crusade, then Skull and finally Temple. At the same time, Hasbro, who had enjoyed well over a decade of success with Lucasfilm properties, having re-released the Star Wars line in the mid-90s after acquiring Kenner, followed suit with an Indy line. The first assortment being, you guessed it, Indy, Marion, Cairo Swordsman, Belloc, Monkey Man, and a German soldier. Now this gets complicated because the line of 3.75-inch figures was not a success. An excellent article on the Robot's Pyjamas illuminated many reasons why this may have been. Now to boil it down, there were multiple waves with too many repeating figures. There was also a preponderance of Crystal Skull figures, and many adult collectors shunned that movie, saying it was bad, and that's putting it politely. In consequence, while stores overstocked the first few waves, many figures, especially Mutt Williams, sat warming pegs, and when the new waves arrived, too many of the new assortments were duplicates of the ones already on shelves. It was a vicious circle, with some of the more fan-requested figures held back until 2011 for the final wave. So even though they did cover all the films, it felt to the collectors like Crystal Skull was the predominant driving force of the line. To top this off, the cost of oil was rising, the credit crunch was looming, and the figures were priced too highly to meet everyone's needs. The mail-away was that interdimensional being skeleton, one of the strongest points of contention of that whole film. The initial sculpts were also not fantastic, with poor likenesses due to factory issues. It's nearly impossible to promise improved versions of figures later down the line and still sell your botched first attempts. Now these won't be the last Indiana Jones figures. With Disney now owning all of the Lucasfilm properties, the Indiana Jones franchise will almost certainly see some kind of sequel, prequel, or remake in the next decade. And that's the kind of burst of energy that toy companies need to get a decent line organised. Hopefully the next one will see evenly balanced waves without duplication beyond classic Indy. Keep the less popular characters rare and chase, keep the sculpts uncannily accurate, and back them up with playsets that inspire children, and indeed adults, to relive the most exciting moments of the best movies. In the meantime, there is a range of mouth-wateringly sumptuous, collector-focused large figures, each rendering Indy and his supporting cast into high-end collectible form, including examples from Sideshow and Hot Toys.
ActionFigureResource.com. Yesterday's toys, today's treasures.